All right, get out your junior grade books and turn to the page with Turquoise Horse. This is by Gerald Hausman. About the story, 12-year-old Lisa has a dream about a turquoise horse, a dream related to the holy people of her Navajo ancestry. When Lisa writes about it for a class assignment, her words pour out into a poem. But after she hands it in, she realizes that her poem is private and realizes that her poem is private and worries that a visiting folk singer will sing it to the class. So you should be on page 26. Some years ago in Navajo County, there was a girl named Lisa Tadashin, whose father was a silversmith. When Lisa was 12 years old, she had a dream in which she chased a horse. She was on foot in the dream, and a horse raced ahead of her, dancing on small, delicate hooves. The dream came again and again. During the day, Lisa did not think about the dream, nor did she mention it to anyone. But at night, before she went to sleep, she remembered the horse, and it made her sad to think that though she saw the horse every night, her dream was always in black and white. There came a night when the dream changed into color. Lisa was running along a narrow trail upon a vast mesa, and the horse was ahead of her, its mane flashing in the wind, its forehooves striking sparks on the hard-packed earth. All right, page 27. There are 3 words that you will come to that I want you to read the definition. Transformed, Hogan, and Latinas. And while we're reading this, I want you to think, what does it mean that Lisa's father has been molded by nature? When it happened, she was not surprised but pleased. The horse reared magnificently on a rock outcropping, and then, in a blaze of blue, it transformed into a turquoise horse. The moment this happened, Lisa knew she was in a dream, because in real life there was no such thing as a blue horses. And then the horse did a wonderful thing. Rearing over the verge, it suddenly leaped into the open, empty air, and pawing miraculously, found its footing in the sky. Then it whined triumphantly and galloped off across the clouds. The next morning, Lisa went to where her father worked on his jewelry behind their hogan. In the warm seasons, summer and fall, he usually did his work under a 4-post juniper shelter, the upper latias of which were spindly, bark-peeled branches. Shadows fell in clean lines at his feet. He worked in the cool of this outdoor workshop until, little by little, the sun grew bolder and bolder and stole all the way into the shadow of the shelter. Lisa liked to watch her father work. His composure seemed cast of the same fire-blackened silver as his bracelets, rings, and pins. He was a man of mud and fire, blood and bones, whose surface was etched and hammered by years of sun and rain. He knew what it meant to be a mold of what it meant as a grown man to have been molded by nature. Lisa knew that her father was wise. She also knew that he was certain of the old days that had been taught to him by his own father. From father to son, mother to daughter, the teachings came down year after year, sun after moon. Father, Lisa said, I have a dream to tell you. She waited while he removed a casting from the hot coals, before which, holding iron tongs in a pair of heavy cowhide gloves, he sat back on his heels of his elk moccasins. Yes, he said finally, tell me your dream. There is a horse. I run after it, but I can never catch it. Mostly the horse is dark because I dream this dream in black and white. But last night, for the first time, the horse looked me in the eyes. I heard it snort loudly before it turned turquoise and galloped away into the clouds. Father, I need to know what this dream means, for I have it every night. Lisa's father said nothing, nor did he look into his daughter's worried face. He bent over his tufa casting and tapped it with a little hammer. Lisa knew what her father was not ignoring her. He was not, as it appeared, concentrating only on his work. He was, she knew, thinking deeply about what she had told him. Then he got slowly to his feet and stretched his arms. You get stiff in that position, he said then. Come with me for a moment, Lisa. Where do you think Lisa's father is taking her? Together they walked on the dry wash just below where her father worked. A little ribbon of water, sky-colored, shivered between the clay banks that rose above their shoulders. After walking for a few minutes, her father stopped. I think it was here, he said. Yes, I am certain of it. Here. What? Lisa asked. I was your age, maybe a little younger, when I made the discovery. Do you see where the water runs down from high up on the hill, where there is now a dry scar on that cliff? Lisa nodded. In rainy times, such soft, eroded places sang full-throated with tumbling water. If you were not careful, when the water ran at its fullest, you could be swept to your death. When I was your age, Lisa's father began, I was caught in one of those sudden storms. The whole hillside seemed to come down on my head. I got swept away. A big juniper branch saved my life. I held onto it for all I was worth. When my grandfather pulled me to safety, we both stopped in our tracks, for directly in front of us was a ruined grave, one that the wild waters had ripped apart. There was silver everywhere, for as you know, the dear possessions of the dead are buried with the body. Lisa's father turned on his moccasined heel and began to walk back to his workshop on the hill above the arroyo. What does this mean, father? She asked. In all that silver there was a bracelet that even now, after all the years, I remember as if it were yesterday. The silversmith had made that bracelet 100 years ago, and yet it was as new as the day he measured the wrist that wore it, a wrist that was once flesh and bone, a wrist that is now dust. What did you do with the bracelet? Looking at his daughter for the first time, Lisa's father smiled a little crookedly. She knew what that meant. Trouble. A lesson. She had done something wrong. You know, it is a bad thing to disturb the sacred places of burial. I did nothing with the bracelet. I merely looked at it. I took it from my eyes for a moment and held it there. Then my grandfather and I walked on, and we erased that place from our memory. It is only now, as you told me of your dream, that I remembered. That gravesite, Lisa said, was ruined in the rain. You didn't know where the real location of the grave was, only where the jewelry turned up at your feet. That is right. Then why couldn't you take it and give it to a proper home? Otherwise, it could have been taken by someone less than yourself, a thief perhaps. To take that which does not belong to you, no matter the circumstances, is a bad thing. Let the runner run, the walker walk, and the thief thieve. You can't change that which is, the rain, the runoff, the broken grave. We didn't touch that silver work. Perhaps it's still there, perhaps not. It doesn't matter. What is important is that we saw the bracelet with our eyes. We embraced it. For that moment on, I knew I would be a silversmith. But how did you know? I knew because I understood, having almost drowned, that only those things which live are worth living for. Lisa said, I understand now. There is something else, her father said, kneeling before his dwindling fire. The thing that made the bracelet so beautiful was the turquoise horse that decorated it. I've never forgotten that horse that seemed to be dancing on a cloud. Lisa waited for him to say something more, but he busied himself with his casting. That night, Lisa dreamed the dream of the turquoise horse, and again she saw it in color. This time the horse danced upon a cloud, just as her father had said, and it beckoned for her to follow. She was afraid. Backing away from the edge of the great cliff where the horse had taken its swift leap into the air, she felt fear in her throat. I can't come with you, she said to the horse. I can't walk on air. Then the horse galloped to the mesa, and kneeling as her father had knelt before the fire, it bowed its head. Lisa had only to take one step, and she would be on its back. She hesitated, and then heard the voice that came from the clouds. The voice said, The turquoise horse is yours now. It was a command, and Lisa obeyed. The horse got to its feet, and in one graceful bound tossed its neck to the east. It dropped off the cliff like falling water. Then it flailed its hooves on the air, parted the clouds, swam up into the sky. Lisa clung to the horse's mane, but she did not feel fearful. Easily, dreamily, like flowing silk, she let the horse have its head, and the horse plunged higher into the cliffs of cloud and swallowed up. Then she felt her body melt as the vapors wrapped her around, and the voice of the cloud person spoke again. Lisa could see nothing, for the mist was everywhere. She felt the gleaming flank muscle of the turquoise horse. This was real, she told herself. The voice of the cloud person was real. Then the world, the universe stood still. The clouds froze, and everything turned into still life. Hear me, the cloud person said. I am of the family of the sun. The horse you ride on belongs to us, but we do not own him. No one can own the turquoise horse. Lisa woke with a start. In the morning, the weekend was over, and it was time to get dressed for school. The dream she'd been having dissolved in her waking mind. She got dressed, put her books in her book bag, and had breakfast with her mother and father. They ate in silence. Morning was quiet time. It was not necessary to speak. Instead, they listened. At school, Lisa remained quiet. In little bits throughout the morning, her dream returned, giving her no peace. It was only after lunch, after she had gone running several miles with her friends, that she realized how tired she was, how her dream had physically drained her. Back in the classroom, her teacher introduced a folk singer, a man with a handlebar mustache, who had been assigned to their school district by the Arizona Commission on the Arts. He walked about the room, plunking a banjo and urging the children to write verses of a song that all of them would compose together. She liked the tune, and the verses rolled out, tinkly and funny, and they made her forget her dream. All the students in the room were laughing, and the mustache man made his banjo ring. Put your head on the floor, pick it up, pick it up. Put your head on the floor, pick it up, pick it up. Lisa could not help smiling at the man, who was all smiles himself. Although he was not Navajo, there was something Indian about him. He didn't act like a white person. Like her father, he was sure of something. That something was inside the tight white drum head of his banjo. If only she were sure. If only she had something she was certain of. The banjo rang for the last time. Then it was time for the students to write their own composition, something of their own, which the mustache man would put to music for the following day. Lisa wasn't going to write anything. She doodled on the creamy sheet of paper that covered her desktop. But her doodling, mindless and abstract, changing into something else, she began to draw the turquoise horse. The moment she saw its image drawn by her own hand on paper, she heard the words of the cloud person. I am the sun's son. I sit upon a turquoise horse at the opening of the sky. My horse walks on the upper circle of the rainbow. My horse has a sunbeam for a bridle. My horse circles all the people of the earth. Today, I, Lisa Todashine, ride upon its broad back, and he is mine. Tomorrow, he will belong to another. The drawing and the words came out of her so fast she didn't have time to think about them. Then they were collected by the folk singer, whose name was John Arrowsmith. For a moment, when he came to each desk to pick up the paper, she felt him touch her, and his hand was rough as sandpaper, not soft the way she imagined a musician's hand should feel, but hard like her father's. That night Lisa did not dream. Restlessly she tossed and turned in her sleep. When morning came, she was unwell. Her father, already out in his workshop by the time she started breakfast, was striking silver with his hammer, and the ting-tang of his hammer made her think of the folk singer named John Arrowsmith. Prickles when she thought of him. Her poem. She was afraid, but was it a poem? She did not know. After breakfast, on her way to the bus stop, Lisa visited her father. He was in that meditative morning mood, not a good time to disturb him, but she had to. Father, I've done a bad thing, she said. Quickly her father's eyes met her own. Then he looked away, waiting politely for her to speak. He didn't busy himself with his jewelry this time. His hands were folded in his lap, and he waited. I dreamed of the turquoise horse, she said gently. No, I dreamed not of him. I was part of him, that I rode him all the way to the top of the sky. There I met a cloud person who told me that the horse belonged to him. I was permitted to ride the turquoise horse, but it belonged to the family of the sun. You've dreamed a great dream, Lisa. You rode the turquoise horse. You've been embraced by the holy people. He looked awed by this, and she burst into tears. He reached toward her without actually touching her, his hands outstretched, his palms open, asking, "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Yesterday, a musician came to our class, and I liked his music. I liked him. I liked the way he played his banjo. It made everyone happy." This is foolish, I know. This is why I am crying. And because I think I've done a bad thing. The singer asked us to write a poem which he would put to music. I wrote about the turquoise horse. Today, I think he will sing about it, and I am ashamed. This is like taking the silver bracelet from the spoiled grave. I had no right to tell my dream in words and put them on paper. I have stolen from a sacred grave. I am a thief. As she said the words, her father listened without expression. When she was done, he broke into a smile. "You have not stolen anything, child. You were given something. A blessed thing that dream was, but how you chose to share it is up to you, your decision, and yours alone. Remember, in the dream, the cloud person said the horse was for all to share. But what if he takes my song and sells it and makes money from it? It would be a sin." Sighing, her father said, "The world's made up of many people. Not all are righteous, but the cloud person trusted you. Now you must trust yourself." That day passed slowly for Lisa. She could hear what people said to her, but they seemed to speak from such a distance, and their voices were almost inaudible. Even on the playground, shouts of her friends came to her in muffled silence. She was waiting for the moment when he would walk into the room and sing her song. She could hear his banjo ringing, his happy mustache face glowing as he sang her song. But at the same time, regardless of what her father said, she felt the awful shame of the betrayed secret. She wanted to bury her song, to hide it away forever. At last, the moment she'd been anticipating arrived. John Arrowsmith came into the classroom. He took out his banjo and tuned it. Then he spread 4 pieces of art paper on a desk. "These are your songs," he said, "and I am going to sing them for you. Naturally, I wish I had the time to make tunes for all of the things you wrote, but I only had one night. Anyway, here goes." John Arrowsmith sang 4 songs, one right after the other. The class loved them. One about a goat that butted everyone, one about a house that flew up to the moon, one with a catchy tune that went, "People these days should be nice to each other. People these days have to care for one another. People these days, people these days." Lisa didn't hear her song, though. He probably hadn't even read it. The hollow feeling inside her got bigger. She was relieved because the secret of the turquoise horse was still a secret. And yet, she was disappointed. After school, walking toward the bus, she saw John Arrowsmith about to get into his pickup truck. He gave her a big smile and waved. "You're Lisa, aren't you?" She stopped in her tracks as he came over, his leather briefcase in hand. He had on a black cowboy hat with a horsehair hat band. Close up, he was rougher looking than she thought. Like his hands, he was weathered in his face. "Did I get your name right?" he said gently. "I'm Lisa Todashin. Doesn't that name mean bittersweet? If so, your father's the silversmith. I'm wearing one of his buckles." Lisa felt the warmth come around her. She liked him. She was right to have trusted him. "He's a silversmith, while you are a poet. I didn't sing your song today because I felt it was private. Something between you and your family, maybe. Well, there's another reason, too. I don't think it's really a song. There may be a fine line of difference between a song and a poem, but I think this is a poem. When you decide to really share it with people, you might think about putting it in a book." Lisa blushed. "Well, so long." He handed the poem back to her. "Poem," she said to herself. "What a funny word. What a funny, lovely, feeling kind of word." When she got back to her back home, she put the poem of the Turquoise Horse on the wall of her room where everyone could see it. Anyone could see it. Anyone in her family, that is. But she knew, because she had changed, that her family was growing. It now included her father and mother, her mother's family and her father's family, a cloud person and a turquoise horse, a folk singer named John Arrowsmith, and people she had not even met who would one day read her poem in the book. She was going to have a big family, of that she was sure.